Swords is just a generic name for long blades. I don't know where exactly to draw the line between knives and swords. Swords differ from each other in size, in weight, in length. They have one edge or two edges. They can have long handle or short handle, one-handed weapon or two-handed weapon, or bastard swords that are good for both, for one hand or two hands. Some swords have point, some swords don't have point and you can't stab with them. Start wielding a long-bladed weapon, a sword, starts as always with a balance point. If you remember, with the stick we found the balance point by moving our hands together until they are stopped. So the balance point of this sword, for example this Dao sword, the Chinese scimitar, is about here. And this means that this is the pivot point if we want fast rotation of the blade. You see, I'm not doing this, I'm doing this. This is a pivot point. This movement is using roll movement for quick direction change. But I can also use long movement, just like with a stick, because this is single-handed weapon. Two-handed swords are act differently. This sword is balanced around here. Still, I need to roll around this point if I want to make quick changes of directions. I can also make large rotation by using the rear hand, just like with the long pole weapons. So I'm using the lower hand and the upper hand just like with pole weapons with the asymmetrical holding at the edge. Very similar. And this is very important because the different holdings give us different modes of movement. Another type of sword we have is bastard sword or hand and a half swords, like this katana. I can use the katana pretty well with single hand wielding, just like the Dao. Of course, it's a bit different and it's much easier to use the Dao with one hand. But this type of swords work well single-handedly or two-hand wielding. Of course, when we have two-handed weapon, we can switch hands. And this is very important, which hand is the upper and which is the lower. The lower hand is actually the one that makes the manipulation. It makes it quicker. If I'm using one hand or two hands, different. Because swords have weight, they are heavier than sticks, usually, we can use the entire body in the movement and the manipulation. We have to, if we want to be efficient. In both cases, when we are using two-handed sword and when we are using light-weighted one-handed swords. Still, you see, my entire body is behind the movement. Even if it was a short sword and just for stabbing, I would be using my entire body behind it. It works pretty much the same with sticks, but with sticks we don't always pay attention to it. We need sometimes heavier weapon to pay attention to it, like axes and swords. Even with two-handed swords, we can have different types. This sword has very long handle, and to use it, I can use the rear end to fight with it, and I need to have longer distance, a larger distance between my hands for manipulation. This is not always better, useful, or more comfortable to use longer handed weapons than the regular two-handed weapons. So we have a lot of different kinds of swords, and what I will show you is just examples of how to take a sword or long blade weapon and try and understand what kind of weapon, what type of weapon is it, what can you do with it. As always, let's start with directions of attack and defense. We start with directions of attack, and we have importance for single or two-handed weapon. So let's start with the attack directions of the single-handed swords. Again, it's just a generalization of how to approach. Different swords have different nuances. So we talk about this now as an example of approach. The plus. Pretty obvious. Now we have the cross, the diagonal directions. And again, the diagonal direction. Pretty straightforward, simple direction. Now we have the frontal roll. Here, very simple, very straightforward. See here, I just drop my hand and it chops from down and I take his ear off. And again here, I take his ear off. I can of course roll down here and roll down here. The back roll direction is a bit tricky. I will attack with the side of my hand, of the weapon holding side. From here I can hit him and cut from the back side. I don't really have this back roll direction. It's a bit tricky of doing so, and it's possible, but it's less comfortable. So it is existing, but not. And of course we can stab. Of course we have the rear end, and we can attack with it just like with the rear end of a stick. We can do manipulations and hit in all directions just like with a stick. Nothing new here. Directions of attack with the two-handed swords. So I will not change the holding. I will keep holding my right hand on the upside and the left hand on the lower part. So we have the plus direction from both sides. Pay attention that I do this for manipulation. I change the position of the hands. I need to twist myself to change direction. We have the 45 degrees. This is obvious. We have the roll direction, just like with a single-handed weapon. The back roll direction is more difficult to do. Again, possible, but difficult. And of course, I can stab him. We can use the handle, the rear side, for blunt hits and small manipulations. It's harder, of course, with when we are keep holding two-handed holding, but it is possible. Directions of defense. I will start with a single-handed weapon. Now we are using training wood weapons, so we can hit the vertical direction. You can see that with single-handed weapon I can add my hand to support. We usually don't want to hit edge to edge like this with real blades, because this will ruin the blade. However, the edge is the hardest part of the blade. It's also the most brittle part. We don't want to hit our weapon. If we stop the hit like this, it might break just in the middle, like because the attacking sword is a wedge that goes through this blade. So what can we do? Well, sometimes we don't have much options. In this type of attack, I don't have much options. I will hit blade to blade, but I will try not to hit the blade perpendicular. We will avoid this. I will give some sort of, see, an angle between the blades. We won't meet each other like this, but this. So, the upper direction. And of course, movement, so it comes and with diverting of the weapon. The lower direction. Same. I just drop here and stop his blade. The other side of the plus, sidewise. See, I slide on his blade. I'm not trying to stop him, but slide through. See? I have an angle between the edges. So this was the plus direction. The 45, the cross direction. 1, 2. This is more difficult direction to not go edge to edge perpendicularly. Now we have the rolls direction. I just let my sword fall on him. I just roll my sword over his sword with the blunt side on the blunt side. Of course, we are just demonstrating blade to blade, but it can be blade to stick or blade to X or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And we have the back roll. One back roll, 2 back roll. This was a single-handed weapon. Now we'll demonstrate the directions with a two-handed weapon. You see, I always move sideways from his blade. I'm not staying here. I moved. Usually two-handed swords will have longer range. Now we'll do the cross. Now roll directions. We actually used them already because it's very similar to the long staff and very similar to the 45 degrees. We use roll because we have two-handed holding. So we have this. For roll directions, again, drop down the weapon and cut. Drop and cut. Drop and cut. Drop and cut. Very simple. And the back roll direction. Very simple. Where do we hit with our weapon and where do we hit the target? Let's start with how we use sword. It's not only dependent on the single or two-handed weapon. With swords we can stab. This is the obvious if we have point. Not all swords have a point. This sword, for example, the Dao, has curved blade. If the blade is curved, that means I can do long slash, and it's not only the movement of the hand. It's not like I hit and it's cut. I move my entire body with it in round movement. I draw a circle with the blade, so the cut can be long and clean cut. But for example, this Dao is also very heavy on the upper side, which means I can drop the weight of the blade like with an axe, and that means I can cleave with this sort of blade, and this sort of blade will make me follow the weight of the blade. I will cleave, I will cut, I will slash, following the heavy edge of the blade. This katana, for example, also have curved blade, so I will also use this katana for slashing, for long movement, long slash, using my entire body in round movement together with a rounded blade to cause round hits, slashing. And this katana is not heavy on the far end, so I won't use it just for cleaving like with an axe. I will not drop the weight to the end. I will have to do long movement through my target and not just dropping the end. Where I can drop this weight with the katana, for example, from above. When I do this movement, I can drop the weight. But this is a very specific sort of movement with this sort of blade, this hit. See, I drop the weight. I lift it up, and with wave form I just drop it with wave internal motion. Different blades have different features. If I had a straight blade, I couldn't do long cuts. Let's imagine this is not curved blade but a straight blade, like a long sword, for example. I won't do long round cuts because the edge isn't round, it's just straight. But I can do cuts, deep cuts, just by touching and slashing into his body with short movement. The construct for hitting with any part of the blade and cut at the point of interface, but not for really long, smooth, continuous movement. You have swords that are just for stabbing, just for long range stabbing. You really have lots of types of swords. So where do we want to hit our target? Well, everywhere. Everywhere is legit. Arteries, throat, elbows. We want to cause biomechanical cuts when we cut the nerves and the muscles. We can stab right here to the heart, into the armpit. Cut the armpits, the knees, we cut the tendons, the Achilles tendon down here, cut it. Of course, stab wherever you want. This is much worse than just a peg leg when you stab somebody with a sword in his leg. We can help him shave. Very important. So we actually want to hit everywhere. With this sort of sword, we can cleave. We can just drop the weight and cleave and chop him down. With swords like this katana, we will do longer movement because it's also two-handed, so we want to have larger distance, larger range, and we will just let the entire blade fall right through him, and we'll try to cleave him from here to here in a single movement, of course, because this is what katanas do. So let's test the four motoric principles we are always testing about weapons, because this is what I do when I have any new object in my hand. I test it to understand it. So let's start with a sword, with a two-handed sword. We have the figure 8 principle. This is the up downwards direction, and this is the down upwards direction. We have the hands working together, right? So it's always chasing hands principle. We don't have separation of directions or opposite direction with our hands because they are locked in position. We can separate if we are leaving one hand, so it's not really applied to two-handed swords. Only figure 8 and chasing hands. For single-handed holding of the sword, we have figure 8 principle. This is up downwards direction. We have down upwards direction. We have chasing hands direction, right? Because we can use our empty hand and use it in combat. We can wield two weapons. We can wield two swords and using chasing hands, just like with sticks. We can use separate the opposite direction and separation of directions. If we have empty hand, so of course the empty hand just helps the weapon hand, and if we are dual wielding, so we are using just like with sticks. But unlike with sticks, we usually want to hit with a specific part, with the edge of the blade. So we have all the four principles of our motorics with the swords, with the single-handed holding of the sword. Let's do some demonstrations of what can be done with swords. Just short demonstration, nothing too fancy. Nothing too fancy. See, I go straight for his arms, and I try not to grab the blade with my finger, just the back of his blade. Here. My primary target usually will be hitting his holding hands. So we have a lot of different stances with swords. We can stand like with a stick, with the front leg, with the back leg. This is a single-handed. I can hold it here, I can hold it here, see, here. Lots of different stances. It depends on the sword and of course on you. There is no better or worse stance. It depends on the situation for what you are used to. For two-handed weapons, we have stances like this, like this, like this, like this. Lots of stances. And to be honest, I don't know which is best. I don't think there is best. I think do what feels good for you when you need it. Right now I can start fencing like this. Or I can start fencing like this. It doesn't really matter. Of course, with two-handed long blade, I can choose to be in long range or short range. It's my choice, just like with the long stabs. Oh, I must pay attention because real fight is not static, right? I must check. he has blade, I have blades, but we also have more body parts. So real fight is not clean. We will use other body parts. We will prevent movement, but hey, his blades can still hit me. So I need to be smarter. I don't always want to go into short distance. Maybe I want to break distance and just cut him for the next round. This is not a stick. I can't do this. I will be cut. So I must, if I already doing this, I must go to his hand itself and prevent his movement. So there are a lot of tricks about fencing, and it's not about showing you if I'm a good fencer or not. This is about showing you how to take any object and try and understand it better. This video is about long blades. There are a lot of kinds of long blades, of swords. You can't use them all the same. If you're taking any type of sword in your hand, play with it. Check what you can do. Check the holdings, check the balance of the weapon, the weight of the weapon, the type of the blade, the edges, the point. Check if the blade is heavy or light at the end. How long is it? What type of movement can you do? What type of motoric principles are applied? What directions are applied in attack and defense with this blade?